25 years after MotoGP's first visit to Motegi in the royal heart of Japan, we're back at one of the world's largest motorsport arenas for round 16 in a riveting 2024 title battle. Built in 1997 by the Honda Motor Company, Motegi is in a mountainous part of Japan's Kanto region and sits around 100 kilometers away from central Tokyo. Tissot Sprint Action is next live. It's time for MotoGP. So 4.8 kilometers, 2.983 miles is the length of the mobility resort Motegi. 14 corners, 8 of them right, 6 of them left. It's a very technical, challenging layout. Lots of hard braking, lots of hard acceleration. You need that perfect balance between a bike that will stop and a bike that will go coming out of these low acceleration gear corners. Plenty of overtaking opportunities if you've got confidence in that front end. Sector 1 starts with hard brakes into turn 1, turn 3 as well, where the long lap penalty loop is. Through the faster part of the circuit, turn 7, 8 and 9. Jorge Martin, championship leader, crashed this morning in a dramatic Q2 at that turn 9. Overtaking hot spots and the highest demanding for the brakes is turn 1, turn 5 and turn 11. You've got to be careful managing that front tyre. Down the hill into the tight turn 11. Look how many overtaking hot spots there are around this 14 corner layout. Ample opportunity if you're looking to make ground from the grid. That's why Martin will be from 11th. This is the move Jack Miller made in turn 11 last year. So 6 days ago in the Lombok sunshine, it was Jorge Martin who powered to a perfect start-to-finish victory in the Indonesian Grand Prix. Pecco Bagnaia sluggish away from the 4th place on the grid as Marc Marquez's world title hopes went up in smoke, quite literally, as this costly engine failure for the Gresini rider surely sees him out of championship contention. Likewise, an Airbus Giannini charging through the field in the 3rd place, but he crashed at the first corner moments after he set the fastest lap of the Grand Prix. But he was unstoppable, he was brilliant, bouncing back from his sprint slump when he crashed out of the lead on the very first lap. Martin back in business, certainly on Sunday in Indonesia. But if you joined us this morning, we certainly hope you did for one of the most thrilling, most dramatic 15-minute qualifying sessions we've had of the season so far. A tale, a story of the fast and the furious. The fastest, well, it was the rookie, Pedro Acosta. First pole position for the 20-year-old Spaniard, a record-breaking 1:43.018. The 3rd youngest rider in Premier Class history to take a pole position. Only the 4th KTM pole position since the start of 2017, as these are live pictures, some very tense scenes down in pit lane here. We've had sort of light rain that has been falling in the last 20 minutes or so here in Motegi. It has disrupted the earlier Moto2 Q2 session, and as you can imagine, certainly for our title contenders, there was a lot of tension, a lot of apprehension down on the grid and in pit lane. Pecco Bagnaia, well, he goes from the middle of the front row in 2nd place. Maverick Vinales on the factory Aprilia starts 3rd. For just the 2nd time in 2024, the first since Austin in Texas, we have 3 different manufacturers on the front row of the grid. So many stories, though, to cover off this morning. Marc Marquez thought he set the first and one and only ever sub-143 lap, a 1:42.8. We thought Marquez had taken his 67th career pole, but he exceeded track limits coming out of turn 4. That lap was scrubbed off. Marquez down in 9th place on the grid, and the world championship leader, Jorge Martin, with a lot of work to do. Middle of the 4th row of the grid for Martin after a crash at turn 9 in Q2, his lowest qualifying since the Red Bull Ring in the summer of 2023. that day he did come through to finish third in the sprint. He's got an awful lot of work to do and potentially tricky and treacherous conditions to cope with as well. It's all set up, it's all poised to be another sensational sprint over 12 laps in about, 20 minutes time. In the company of Matt Burt and Lewis Sotheby in the commentary box with Simon Crafar down in pit lane. Lewis, we had another thriller this morning in Q2. There were so many different stories. Hard really to know where to start. Acosta, joyful and jubilant in Japan. Marc Marquez ruining what may have been.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever seen a Tissot sprint in the build-up to it surrounded with such uncertainty and unpredictability as we have with this one, with the spots of rain in the air. The track and the ground beneath us on the way to the commentary box is damp, if not completely wet, and Marc Marquez livid, I think it's fair to say, with what we saw earlier on. This was the moment that he lost pole position, not that he knew it at the time, clipping the green. That is matter of fact. Marc Marquez exceeded track limits on the way out of turns 3 and 4 during Q2 this morning. That is not Marc Marquez's bone of contention. What he is unhappy about is how long it took to issue that notice that the lap time had been deleted, which left him with no time left to respond to that. In the end, though, pole position went to Pedro Acosta, and you could not really argue that Pedro Acosta, on form of this weekend, does not deserve pole position. What a weekend he's having. Shark
attack incoming. What a pole position it was this morning for Pedro Acosta. A record-breaking 1:43.018. It has been threatening, hasn't it? Twice he started on the grid second in Austin and in Aragon, but it's his first pole position, and you have to say it's not just his one-lap pace, which he showed so brilliantly this morning in Q2. Yesterday on Friday here in Motegi, he had excellent race pace. He is really the pre-race favourite for this afternoon's 12-lap Tissot sprint and the main Grand Prix here tomorrow. It's a heavyweight second row of the grid as well, featuring Enea Bastianini. Some response from the beast after his heavy crash yesterday afternoon at turn 13. He leads row 2.
Alongside Brad Binder and Frankie Morbidelli, championship contenders and likely sprint podium contenders all over this Motegi grid. David Hurtado, he's probably one of the few people that's relaxed, or certainly at least he's trying to look relaxed as we get ready for the sprint. You could see Pecco Bagnaia having a very long look at the start-finish straight just to see how much water is falling, what kind of levels he's going to have when he heads out for this sprint that's upcoming. 12 laps to come, and you feel that the sighting lap when they head round to the grid could be as important as any of the 12 laps that they're racing over, because they'll have to try in that 90 seconds to the grid of get a good idea of just what kind of grit levels they have underneath them.
Yet another heroic performance from Fabio Di Gianantonio in this morning's fast and frenetic Q2 session. He heads row 3 for Pertamina Enduro VR46 Racing, trying to save energy, conserve energy, really struggling and suffering, isn't he, with aches and pains everywhere as he compensates for that dislocated left shoulder in Austria. Yesterday tried to ride in the morning without painkillers, didn't work, needed some medical intervention. He only did one run, one time attack this morning, just to try and save a bit of energy. Excellent job, 43.998, put Digi at 7th on the grid. He was the last of that batch of 7 riders to find laps in the 43s.
Well, we've got around about 15 minutes to go before this sprint gets underway, and I think our eyes are all trained closely on the skies. It's rained on and off throughout the day really here in Motegi. As you mentioned, it really had a huge bearing on what we saw in qualifying earlier on today. It's been drizzling through the Moto 3 and Moto 2 qualifying sessions. The heaviest of the rain really we've had so far today came around about 20 minutes ago during Moto 2 qualifying, which essentially left that session as a one-lap shootout right at the very start of qualifying. So that is why the MotoGP riders are so concerned and so cautious about what is lying in store for them. Brad Binder, you saw there, I guess would have been one of the many riders who would have been quite happy for this one to stay dry, because the KTMs have looked very competitive. It's not just Acosta who's looked as if he's got pace to fight at the front this weekend. Binder has too. How
rattled will be the World Championship leader after his costly error at the back end of that Q2 session this morning, losing the front of his Pramac Ducati on the brakes into turn 9. The outcome of that means Martin, middle of the 4th row of the grid in 11th. As he mentioned, his worst qualifying since Austria in 2023. Only the 10th time in 70 Grand Prix in MotoGP does he find himself qualifying outside the top 10. It's a very rare occurrence to find the 26-year-old Spaniard so far down the field.
Yeah, and it's a crash that not only will compromise him for the sprint this afternoon, but over the full-length Grand Prix tomorrow. Of course, as you mentioned at the start of the broadcast, there are a lot of overtaking hotspots and opportunities here, but many of the straights are out of slow corners, which is quite difficult to follow someone out of those corners because they go on the throttle a lot earlier than you do, and to actually get in a position to overtake. But Jorge Martin has got no choice in the sprint this afternoon and in the race tomorrow to try and limit the damage to his championship advantage. Starting from the fourth row of the grid in 11th, there is no option for the Martinator. He is going to have to attack.
Just follow Marc Marquez. I'm sure Marc will find a way through, as he so often does. If Martin needs some inspiration, well, just look at Marc Marquez, who has shown repeatedly so far this season an uncanny ability to fight his way through from pretty poor qualifyings to podium finishes. The last time Martin was so far back on the grid in Austria, he did come through from 12th to 3rd in the sprint at the Red Bull Ring, but only got through to 7th in the Grand Prix. How decisive could that be then, as the crews and the personnel head on to what is going to be a very nerve-wracking grid? You can see there in the background on the approach to turn 3, the rain flags are waving. Maverick Vinales is going from the front row of the grid, just dangling that left foot there, just trying to feel the grip as he comes through turn 4.
He is on wet weather tyres as he leaves the grid. That doesn't mean he's definitely going to start on them. He might just be choosing to scrub those in ahead of the race, although you'd imagine with wet tyres on that bike there would also be something akin to a wet setting on that bike too. Very, very difficult conditions. Just what kind of uncertainty awaits the riders in this sprint, Simon?
Yes, Lewis, I'm standing on the grid, and if you look at the asphalt surface, all the stones are dry, but it's damp between them all, if that makes sense. Where it's a little bit lower, it's not very nice conditions, you know. I think great for those riders that find something extra in those tricky conditions.
Yeah, thanks very much, Simon. You got to think about riders that have nothing to lose, plenty to gain.
Just something to add there, Matt, sorry to butt in, it is really light drizzle, like very light, not enough to be a worry if it was completely dry, but I think it's making it difficult to be completely dry. I've been getting weather updates from a buddy, Mike, who's been sending me aviation ones, and they say it's meant to continue like this pretty much for the rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Sam. That's a slick tyres, isn't it? Slick tyres for the Gian Antonio and slick tyres for Jorge Martin by the looks of it. As we mentioned, there's no guarantee that Vinales will start this sprint with those rain tyres. But when you look at riders that are normally so good in these changing conditions, you're thinking of Marc Marquez, and he now hasn't got to worry, hasn't got to factor in the championship battle. Now he's, 78 points behind Jorge Martin. You look further back as well at the likes of Jack Miller in 14th place, who was so close to Q2 yesterday, just 0.03 of a second down. Miller will be throwing caution to the wind as well from the middle of that 5th row.
Yeah, we're not out there on the racetrack, so we're having to sort of trust the pictures on our screens, but certainly looking at it, I think the only option you can go with here in this sprint is to go with slick tyres. Surely there isn't enough water on the racetrack. You burn up those wet weather tyres very quickly. It is worth pointing out, although this is of course a shorter sprint, flag to flag rules will still be in operation.
So the pressure and the tension is getting seriously ramped up down on this grid. You can see the rain spots on the screen of Jorge Martin's Pramac Ducati. A big opportunity you feel now with Martin 11th on the grid for Pecco Bagnaia to close in on that 21-point deficit across today and tomorrow, with Bagnaia 2nd on the grid. Let's get the thoughts of Davide Tardozzius with Simon.
Davide, always good to hear your thoughts, and it's tricky conditions. I know it could be worse, but what are your thoughts? Is it obviously a big chance for Pecco?
A big chance for everybody. I think that there are some riders that in this situation can absolutely play a jolly because it's a matter of be crazy, you know, on the first couple of laps, or if it comes some more drops of rain. So everybody in the grid can win if something happen with the weather. So no way to have an idea to who will be on the podium.
Just one other question for you, not a usual one for you, but Pecco is normally the rider that sets the benchmark for braking and turning in that front feel so good. He always looks so good on the bike, but Pedro Acosta, all weekend I've been watching him do that, and it's quite amazing.
Absolutely, I think that Pedro he deserved the pole because he rode very well during the weekend and so far. But we'll see, and I think that he will be the guy that will take more risks than the others for sure, because he needs to win, he wants to win, and those are the right conditions to be, how you say, a bit wild, you know, on the ride. So I think that Pedro can do a fantastic race.
Davide, sorry to keep you, but just briefly, what would you like Pecco to do?
I hope that Pecco and Enea will arrive at the end of the race, and we'll see what it will be the result.
Best of luck.
Yeah, thanks very much, Simon. Thanks to Davide Tissot. We saw there for the first time since Portimao in 2020, a KTM rider sitting at the head of a MotoGP grid, and it is the rookie, the 20-year-old Spaniard Pedro Acosta, who just keeps ripping up the record books and showing what a massive star of the future he is. There's Maverick Vinales' factory Aprilia then. That will be the change over to slick tyres, won't it, as he came to the grid, did the formation lap on the rain tyres. He's in a deep conversation there is with his crew chief, Jose Manuel Casal. Just trying to make sure. I think he's just said to his crew chief, Manu, what's everybody else doing? Look, he's looking around like an owl, isn't he, Manu, trying to find out what some of those rivals on the grid are using. Vinales had a good weekend, actually, the 29-year-old Spaniard. He was third fastest this morning and back on the front row of the grid for the first time in 8 Grand Prix since he was on the front row in Assen.
Did a lot of his work yesterday afternoon on the medium rear tyre. That's not the rear tyre that he will be using, nor anyone else you'd expect in the sprint. Information certainly on the grid lineup is that everybody's going for the soft rear tyre. Totally understandable given the shorter distance. I repeat though, the flag-to-flag rules do still apply to a sprint, so should it rain heavily, they do have the option to come in and change motorcycles. You'd feel it's unlikely though, because not so much time to win the time back.
Good to see Maverick Vinales then back on the front row for the first time since the Dutch TT. Unfortunately, the fortune's not going quite the same way for his teammate Aleix Espargaro, the factory Aprilia garage. Aleix's lowest qualifying since Austin 2021. He goes from 15th on the grid. Let's get the thoughts of Aprilia boss Paolo Bonora.
Paolo, from the beginning of the weekend, Maverick looks like those events that he has confidence up and he's strong every time on the bike. Also, can you tell us about Aleix? It's not looking like it's going perfectly.
Yes, right, Simon. Since the start, Maverick feel immediately the confidence with the bike. He likes so much this track, and he pushed a lot during the qualifying, and he achieved this great result. Unfortunately for us and for Aleix, we didn't find the correct setting for him. He struggled a lot to brake, to stop the bike in the hard braking. Is the key here in Motegi.
Good luck.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks to Aprilia's Paolo Bonora. Yeah, one to watch, Maverick Vinales. He's certainly in that category of riders with nothing to lose. As Davide Tardozzi said, Pedro Acosta could just go for broke, can he? This morning when he came into Parc Ferme and saw that #1 for pole position, he said, I've missed that. That's what I'm here for. That's Jorge Martin, just trying to block out all the noise, keep himself focused. This is unfamiliar territory, isn't it, for the Martinator? The previous lowest starting position for him so far this season was a 7th place in Catalonia. Didn't get through to the podium in the sprint on that occasion, although he did come through from 7th to 2nd in the main Grand Prix.
Yeah, Jorge Martin, I guess, might see these slightly unusual and uncertain conditions as a bit of an opportunity. I guess easier to make up ground in conditions such as this as it would be in a conventional dry race with the sun shining over our heads. So Jorge Martin might well have a little more opportunity to make up ground in this sprint. Starting from the very front then for the first time in MotoGP, here's Pedro Acosta, his team manager, Nico Goyons with Simon.
Nico, awesome Pedro has been, in my opinion, this weekend so far. Please give us your thoughts.
Yeah, it's true that we know, as I told you, since Misano is in great form. We made some strong choice since Misano, and it seems to pay off. We know the bike is quite fast here. Brad proved it last year. So we know the bike is fast. We have some good chance, and Pedro is in a good form. So let's enjoy this. This pole position was a little bit unexpected. Mark gave us in the last moment, but we take it. We feel that we deserve it. So let's start from this and see what can come.
Thank you, Nico.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks to Nico Goyon. Yeah, the history books, regardless of what happened in Motegi's Q2 session here this morning, it was a dramatic one. It will show Pedro Acosta has pole position for the very first time. He has experience of leading one lap so far in a Tissot sprint this season. That was one single lap at the Circuit de Barcelona, Catalonia, but he has not led a lap since that moment. So Acosta with a great opportunity to take that first victory in the Premier class. Alongside him, two riders who've done a lot of winning in their Grand Prix careers, Pecco Bagnaia and Maverick Vinales. We are, what, about 5 minutes away from lights out then here in this sprint in Motegi. Just looking out of our commentary box window, the rain certainly hasn't worsened, it hasn't picked up. I feel in some respects we've escaped the worst of the weather. I mean, there was some forecasts for saying that we were going to get torrential rain around the start of the sprint. That could still happen, because in the next 3 minutes, we were 5 minutes away from the start of the Grand Prix here last year in Japan, when the heavens absolutely opened. But yeah, at the moment, certainly the track dry enough for the slick tyres. Will that change? We've never had a flag to flag in a sprint before.
We've never had. No, there's every chance of it happening today. Although, as I mentioned, I guess you're more likely to see a flag to flag if it goes from dry to wet, if it rains so much that you just fall off the road on your slicks. But of course, in only a 12-lap sprint, you've got to win back an awful lot of time in a very short distance. So I guess unlikely to see any bike changes unless it is the only option. So Pedro Acosta, as you say, is in a position where he has got no considerations of the World Championship. Pecco Bagnaia right next to him on the grid certainly does. But Pedro Acosta might be in a position where he is setting the pace and being the reference and almost the guinea pig for the rest of the field in this Tissot sprint if it does rain. And we saw with Pecco Bagnaia back at Misano when it started to rain, the field bottled up behind him. So in some respects, you almost don't want to be in the front when the conditions are as uncertain as this. Yeah, every row seems packed with sort of iffy condition specialists, doesn't it? You think of the likes of Brad Binder on the second row of the grid in 5th place. Binder, he will not be wanting to see headlines in the Pierre Mobility Group going the way of Pedro Acosta. Of course, KTM, their last victory in a Tissot sprint was from Brad Binder, and that was all the way back at the Spanish Grand Prix in Jerez at the early part of 2023. Their barren run on Sunday stretches back even further in the dry, at least, to Catalonia 2021. So are we going to see a rare sight as a KTM takes victory here potentially in this 12-lap sprint? Front row of the grid then, as the tension increases, as the clock ticks down to lights out here. Maverick Vinales on the front row for the first time since Assen. Pecco Bagnaia second on the grid. What a chance for him to eat into that 21-point lead in Jorge Martin's World Championship. But on pole position for the very first time, the third youngest in Premier Class history. You've had the shark warning, watch out on pole, Pedro Acosta.